Welcome to Mr. Biz Radio, biz talk for biz owners. If you're ready to stop faking the funk and take your business onward and upward, this show is for you. And now, here's Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth.
All right, welcome to another episode of Mr. Biz Radio with me, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth. I try to say it so fast, I get tongue-tied there. This week, guys, we're going to talk about something that, again, we try to cover these topics that are very pertinent to our audience. And we're going to talk about burnout, and not just burnout, but how to beat burnout and how to simplify that process and being able to beat burnout with using just 5 questions. And so we have an expert this week to help us with that. Dr. Mylaine Riobe, I want to make sure I get that right, is a double board certified medical doctor in OB-GYN in the exciting new field of integrative functional medicine, and has a special area of expertise in Eastern medicine, which she has studied for the last 5 years. She uniquely combines East and West to help clients beat fatigue and burnout using 5 simple questions that reveal their dynamic metabolic type. We're going to talk about that, which unlocks the secrets of why her clients are too tired to launch or up-level their businesses. In addition to being a doctor, she's the mom of 2 amazing Gen Z teens. I'm sure that's challenging. An entrepreneur, author, and avid fitness buff and podcaster, all the while walking her talk in living a holistic lifestyle. Dr. Riobe, welcome to Mr. Biz Radio.
Thank you so much, Mr. Biz. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I know we talked, gosh, it's been months ago now when we originally talked about coming up and having you on the show. And the timing, I don't think could be better, honestly. I mean, this topic is always something that's, at the forefront, especially with, again, a lot of our listeners, viewers being entrepreneurs and subscribing to that hustle and grind and, work-life balance. What's that? So I think burnout is pretty prevalent amongst the people, which I guess is a good / bad thing, that watch and listen to the show. Before we start diving into that, though, give us a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey. Again, I know you were OB-GYN and you kind of shifted gears with that. So tell us a little bit about that journey, if you would.
Yeah, sure. I went the traditional route, but in the back of my mind, I always had a holistic philosophy that came from my grandmothers. We're from the Caribbean, so there's always an herb or a tea or something, a cure for everything. And so I grew up with both sides. My dad was a dentist. My mom was a nurse. Both my grandparents worked in the hospital. My grandmother was a nurse. So we had the conventional medical side. And then we had this other side, this herbal side, this natural holistic side too. Growing up in the United States, the natural inclination was to go the conventional route. So I went to, conventional medical school. I did all the things that were necessary to get into a good medical school, to get into a good residency program. And I was excited because what we understood was that we'd be able to really help a lot of people. And I picked OB-GYN because I wanted to be able to do everything and to help people to be well. That was always my focus, was wellness, wholeness. And I, beat my head against the concrete wall for, 13 years of going through this grind of learning everything I could about my specialty so that I could go out and help people and in turn help myself, because if I can help other people, that means I can also stay healthy and I can live a vibrant and healthy life. And so, that was the selfish motivation there. And then I graduated and I went out into the real world, and I very quickly realized that that was not at all what I was going to be able to do. And so I became very frustrated, because what I realized after I was in the real world of private practice is that people don't come in with life-threatening emergencies all day like they do in residency programs. So I trained in Philadelphia, and we were trained to deal with emergencies, people coming in with appendicitis and pregnancy emergencies, and sometimes even heart attacks and strokes. And we became very good at reacting and responding to those things and pulling people back from the brink of death. What we didn't get training on was actually the more common things that people come in with in the real world. And one of the most common, if not the most common complaint my patients came in with was fatigue, exhaustion, burnout. And all of a sudden I hit this brick wall and I didn't have any means of helping those people out. Now we got some training, right? We were told, make sure that patient doesn't have cancer as a cause of fatigue. Make sure that patient doesn't have a thyroid condition, diabetes. In the real world, it turns out that most people don't have those things when they first come in with fatigue and exhaustion. And so I was stuck. I had nowhere to go. And then the little voice in my head, with my grandmother's words of wisdom started, banging around in my head. Yeah. And I just decided one day, you know what, I'm going to go study traditional Chinese medicine. And so I took this plunge, and this was, my daughter was a year old, not even a year old. She's now 18. So I embarked on this journey about 18, 19 years ago. I took a course out in California. And what I learned from that course is I needed to learn more. The most important lesson Chinese medicine teaches you is how little you know about how the body actually functions. And so I dove really deep for 5 years, and I studied and studied and studied. I was really intrigued. And I did a voluntary 2-year internship with my mentors down in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. I drove down every week, saw patients with them all day, until I became really, really well-versed in traditional Chinese medicine. And it just opened up everything for me. And I went back into my practice, and now I was able to help people treat fatigue. And fast forward now to the pandemic, right? So I would have people come in, they would come in, I would evaluate them, I'd ask them questions. In Chinese medicine, we look at the tongue and feel the pulse. And then I would use this information to help them eliminate their fatigue. And it worked really well. With the pandemic, what happened is I was no longer able to have the patient physically come into the office. And I had to really think hard, how am I going to help people when all I can do is see them, through telemedicine? I don't have their arm with me to check their pulse. I can have them stick their tongue out, but that wouldn't give me much of the information. So I developed these 5 simple questions that what I realized over the years of the pandemic is I could help people figure out for themselves why they were tired, and to help them develop their own personal wellness plan based on that information. And it was basically a forgotten language. Chinese medicine helps you to rediscover the forgotten language that your body actually speaks to you all day. Through your fatigue symptoms, through your aches and pains, it's actually telling you not only why you're tired and why you're achy, but actually how to fix it. It's just that your body doesn't have the tools available to do that. So it's up to us to decode the language, to give it the tools, and then it finds its own path. And we get out of the vicious cycle of fatigue and burnout. So that's how I discovered that.
Well, interesting path for sure. And I love it because, and I know when we talked a few months back, I'm a huge proponent of treating the problem, not the symptoms. And I know we talked about that a little bit a couple of months ago. And, ironically enough, some of your trauma experience, in an ER or wherever it may have been, I would almost question as a neophyte in the space, of course, but how many of those trauma situations were because of there was a problem that was never treated, and it just manifested itself and got worse and worse and worse. And so it'll be interesting to talk about that. We're going to hit a break here, and we're going to come back. We're going to dive a little bit more into that, as well as talking about these 6 dynamic metabolic types, which will be super important. And then finally, we're also going to talk about these 5 questions. Everyone's probably wondering now, what are these 5 questions? So come back after the break on Mr. Biz Radio. We'll get the Mr. Biz tip of the week, and we'll continue talking with Dr. Riobe.
If you would like to reach hundreds of thousands of business owners every week, Mr. Biz Radio can help. Our show airs globally 7 days a week for more than 25 hours across several internet radio stations, plus 20 plus podcast platforms. Also, video exposure on the new exclusive Mr. Biz Network streaming channel, which gets blasted to 100 plus streaming platforms, and the Mr. Biz YouTube channel, and our 350,000 social media followers multiple times every week. Join Mr. Biz Nation as an advertiser by emailing us at info@MrBizSolutions.com.
Are you ready to automate your business? Automation is the key to scaling a business and building wealth. It's also one of the most difficult things for a small business owner to do on their own. If you're looking for help with automation, Pulse Technology CRM can help. We have an exclusive offer for Mr. Biz Nation. We will build everything for free, even if it's a sophisticated funnel. Visit thepulsespot.com/Mr. Biz for this exclusive offer.
Got a question for Mr. Biz you want answered on air? Email it to info@MrBizSolutions.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. It's time for Mr. Biz tip of the week. And this week's tip is, a lot of times I have 3 pillars of financial success that I work through. So I start with every client, and those are cash flow, budgeting, and pricing. And one of the things I hear a lot of time people talk about with budgeting is a lot of people, most businesses honestly don't have a budget. And oftentimes because they don't know how to create one. I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do. Well, let me tell you where not to start. Let me tell you the number one biggest mistake that I see with budgets, and that is to straight line everything, your revenue and or your expenses. What I mean by that is keep the numbers very simple. Let's say your goal for the year is $1.2 million in revenue, and you say, I'm going to put $100,000 in each month over the 12 months. That's going to get me my 1.2 million. Almost all businesses have some sort of seasonality or cyclicality to them. And what will end up happening is if you don't bake that into your budget, you're going to get 3-4 months into the year and your budget's going to be all out of whack because you didn't put the seasonality in, and you're not going to know if you're ahead, if you're behind, you're doing well, you have problems. So critically important. It's almost never a way to go with the straight line. It's the simplest way for sure, but it almost makes your budget meaningless. It's not helpful at that point. So those of you out there starting a budget and wanting to create a budget, definitely keep that in mind. Super important. Do not straight line your budget. All right, that's Mr. Biz tip of the week. And let's get back into talking with Dr. Riobe. So I wanted to give you a chance. I know I'd mentioned it. You probably were like waiting to talk at the end because I said, hey, I kind of figured some of this, was that part of the how you switched from OB-GYN to, it sounds like part of your journey was you realized that some of these trauma situations that you were dealing with during your residency, but you weren't helping those people not get to the trauma part. Is that part of the journey that led you, to making the switch that you did?
Definitely, finding the root cause, like we were talking about months ago. And I believe that what we'll find in our medical studies and scientific studies when we become more able to do better studies is that the fatigue you have today becomes the disease you have tomorrow. So fixing fatigue, fixing burnout prevents diseases. It doesn't just give you more energy so you can tackle the day and get your business off the ground or up level it. You're actually unknowingly preventing those diseases that people end up in the emergency room with down the road. The reason we don't make the connection is because it takes years for that fatigue today to become diabetes tomorrow. Like that tomorrow is a decade or more down the road. So the good news is that means we have a ton of time to fix the fatigue, and your body is incessantly talking to you in the way that as you move through your day, every symptom, everything that you experience is actually your body talking to you to tell you whether or not it's either giving you a thumbs up or a thumbs down with everything you do. Once you understand that, you can figure out, okay, I'm this particular dynamic metabolic type. This is my story as to why I'm tired. And so my body's telling me the story of its fatigue so that I can figure out what it needs, what's in its way, what's blocking it, so that I can unfold what I call the 4 pillars of my wellness so that I can get out of this fatigue, again, up level my business, get it off the ground, do all the things I want to do, and unknowingly prevent a bunch of diseases down the road.
Down the road. I love it. Well, that's a great segue. So let's walk through those 6 dynamic metabolic types. Let's start to dive into that a little bit if we could.
Perfect. Yeah. So the 6 dynamic metabolic types are broadly separated into 2 categories. So the first category, which is what the first 4 questions help us to know, is whether or not you have what I call an excessive dynamic metabolic type or a deficient dynamic metabolic type. That's the most critical piece of information, and that's the biggest story that your body is going to tell you. And when I say you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, people will ask, well, if I have extra energy, why do I feel tired, right? And I tell people it's because not all energy is useful. So when you have extra energy, your body is not into doing anything extra, right? Your body's all about balance. So if there's too much of something or too little of something, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it as fatigue. And so too much energy usually comes in the form of toxins, inflammation, or poor circulation. And that's why people are fatigued, right? If you have too little energy, if you have what I call a deficient dynamic metabolic type, the story your body's trying to tell you is, hey, I don't have enough energy. Things are missing inside of me to give you the energy that you need to do the things you need to do. So we need to distinguish whether we have an excess dynamic metabolic type or a deficient. And the 5 questions will help us do that. The next broad category actually has to do with temperature. And that's something we never talk about in medicine. The temperature of your body actually, again, is your body talking to you. And so we once we know if you have an excess or a deficient dynamic metabolic type, now we're going to categorize it as hot, cold, or neutral temperature. And that's going to be really important. So being too hot, you literally feel warm all the time. So some women might describe that as hot flashes, night sweats. Even some men may have night sweats. It's duking it out with everybody to control the air conditioner, right? You're always throwing off the covers because you're too hot. Like you literally know that you're too warm. Sometimes if you take your temperature, it's a little bit above normal, right? Maybe it's 99 and your doctor's always thinking you're sick when you're not, right? So that's how you know you're hot. If you're cold, you literally feel cold. You're that one that's always got the jacket on. You know, you're the one that your body temperature may even be too low. You're always wanting to throw the covers on and you don't want people to turn the air conditioner on because you're always cold. And then there's the neutral where you don't feel hot or cold. And so that creates the 6 dynamic metabolic types. So now you know if you're a hot excess, a cold excess, a temperature neutral excess, or if you're hot deficient, cold deficient, or temperature neutral deficient. Once you know which of those 6 dynamic metabolic types you are, once you know what bucket you fall into, so to speak, now you know what language your body is talking to you. And again, it's all about balance. So if you're too hot, the way that you correct that is you cool yourself down. If you're too cold, the way you correct that is you warm yourself up. If you're excessive, you drain out that extra energy. If you're deficient, you build it up. And that's where we use the 4 pillars of wellness. So you'll know exactly what to do throughout your day to help you restore that balance so that you correct that dynamic metabolic type so that you are revived, energized, you can take your business to the next level, have that work-life balance, and do the things you love to do.
I love it. We had someone on actually, no, I don't think we've had him on the show yet. We've got someone who's he calls himself a human biologist. He's not a doctor or anything like that, but he worked in the mortality space for a long time in his career. And now he's shifted over to this. And, one of the things he talks about that I think really comes across from what you're saying as well, Dr. Riobe, is he says, I talk to patients all the time or people that say, well, I'm 50 and I feel kind of crappy when I wake up in the morning, but that's just a part of being 50. And he's like, no. You shouldn't feel that way just because you're 50 years old or you're 55 or you're 60. You should be feeling great. But he said, oftentimes people just get used to and it becomes the new norm. Like, well, I wake up in the morning and it takes me a while to get out of bed and I'm creaking and cracking and I don't feel good. And I don't get moving until 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. That's because I'm 50 or I'm 60 or I'm whatever, fill in the blank. And he said, no, not at all. Like there are things you can do. And that's why I'm really curious to get into these 5 questions, because I think it'll be very powerful for people to hear these things, because especially as simple as these questions, like you mentioned, people can ask themselves these questions and start to determine, where they're at and what their body's telling them. So I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to hit a break here. You can find out more about Dr. Riobe at awakenedwellnessnow.com. We'll put it in the show notes as well. And also follow her on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
How would you like to have direct access to Mr. Biz to help you run your business more profitably and more efficiently? At MrBizSolutions.com, you get live access to not only Mr. Biz, but also several of his hand-picked and trusted business experts, each with 20 plus years of experience to help you optimally manage and grow your business. That's just the start of where Mr. Biz Solutions begins. Learn more at MrBizSolutions.com. That's MrBizSolutions.com.
Business owners have a continually growing to-do list with little time for revenue-producing activities. With Check Off Your List and their experienced team of virtual assistants, you can focus on growing your business. Visit checkoffyourlist.com to learn how Check Off Your List's skilled team can handle your day-to-day tasks like social media, bookkeeping, calendar maintenance, and much more. Contact Check Off Your List at checkoffyourlist.com or call 888-262-1249 to see how their virtual assistants can help you live to work rather than work to live.
Check out all three of Mr. Biz's best-selling books at MrBizBooks.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. And again, we're talking about beating burnout. And we covered a lot of great things in the first two segments. And I'm really looking forward to these 5 questions now. It's almost been like a movie. You see the build up to the movie and the crescendo. And so I'm looking forward to this. So Dr. Riobe, what are those 5 questions that we could be, asking ourselves to see how our body's talking to us?
Absolutely. So we do have a burnout assessment on our website where we have those 5 questions, and it's a little diagram, and you just follow along as you answer them. And then it tells you what your dynamic metabolic type is. We also have a PDF included in that document that gives you tips on how to get started with your personalized wellness plan. So we're not going to have time to cover that on the show, but I just want to let people know that they can get even more information from that. But the first question is, what is your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10 when you first wake up in the morning? Just like we were talking about in that last segment. So you want to rate yourself and actually come up with a number in your mind and write it down on the burnout assessment. So a 1 would be you're so exhausted you cannot get out of bed. A 10 would be you can bounce out of bed and do whatever you want to do right from the get-go. And so you want to know what that number is, because that number is going to factor into the other questions. So once you know that number, you move on to question number 2. Question number 2 is, does that number that you rated yourself when you first wake up go up or down as you move through your day? So as you have that cup of coffee, as maybe you go and run and take your shower and get ready for the day, as you move around, do you actually feel better or worse? So those people who say, yeah, I have to move around, once I get going, I feel better. So I was a 5 when I woke up, but after I moved around a little bit, I became a 7 and an 8. What that tells you, what your body is relaying to you, is you had to force that energy to move around to feel better. So in other words, you had extra energy that you had to force to move and get out of your way to feel better. That tells you you're an excess dynamic metabolic type, right? If you say, you know what, I woke up at 5 and gosh, it just went down from there. As I moved around and I, tried to get going, I got even more tired. I would take a nap if I could. My 5 went down to a 2. That tells you you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So you want to follow the arrow up or down. And that leads you to question number 3. Does that number that you woke up with go up or down with exercise? So again, if you woke up with a 5 and you say, hey, yeah, when I work out, I feel so much better. In fact, if I miss a workout, I feel lousy. Right? That's telling you, again, your body is telling you, you need to force that extra excess energy around so that you don't feel tired, right? And that unblocks your metabolism and that helps you feel better. That's again telling you you have an excess dynamic metabolic type. If you're the one that says, oh gosh, my 5 goes down to a 2, and if I work out, I feel like I got hit by a truck. In fact, I don't even work out because I'm too tired, right? If that's your story, that's telling you, again, you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type. And that's really important to know. And then that we move on to the next question is, do you feel better or worse when you rest? So if you're that person that has to work out to feel better, and as you're sitting at your desk, you're falling asleep and you have to constantly get up and move, that's again telling you that you're forcing that, bad energy, that inflammation, those toxins, you're forcing them to move around so they get out of your way, so you feel better. That's telling you you have an excess dynamic metabolic type. So that kind of confirms you're in excess. If you say, yeah, if I actually can take a nap, I actually feel better. If I can just rest for a little bit, I feel better. My numbers go up if I rest. That's telling you you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, because you're able to restore. When you stop moving, your body can make more energy and you feel better. That's the sign of a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So now you should really know which of those two broad categories you've fallen into. The last question has to do with temperature. And that is, do I feel hot or cold compared to most other people? So you want to be careful here that you're not comparing yourself to one other person, right? So most people will default and compare themselves to their spouse. Well, you don't know, what's going on with your spouse, but you have to compare yourself to multiple people. So if everybody in your family thinks it's too hot when you're under the covers all the time, that's telling you you're too cold, right? Or if you feel cold all the time, and if you take your temperature first thing in the morning before you get out of bed or eat or drink anything, and it's consistently under 98.6. I have some clients with temperatures 96, 97. That's telling you for sure you have a cold dynamic metabolic type, right? So now, once you've known if you're excess or deficient, now you can categorize yourself as cold deficient, or cold excess. And then you can categorize yourself. If you're the one that's too hot all the time, you're always thrown off the covers, trying to turn the air conditioner up so it gets colder, and nobody else around you is cold or hot, excuse me. Or maybe even you're a little bit thirsty. That tells you you're a hot dynamic metabolic type. So now you'll know if you're a hot excess or a hot deficient. And then if you say, I don't feel hot or cold, I'm fine. My temperature is usually normal, not a problem. Then you're a temperature neutral dynamic metabolic type. And now you'll know if you're temperature neutral excess or temperature neutral deficient. So once you go through our burnout assessment, it'll be like crystal clear which of those boxes you fall into. And that's your story. That's your story as to why you're burnt out and tired. And now it also tells you how to fix it, right? So now that you know, hey, I'm a hot excess dynamic metabolic type, we have tips in our burnout assessment guide of what type of food to eat to make sure that you remove those toxins and that inflammation from your system and cool yourself down. So the 4 pillars of wellness are eat, move, rest, and detox. So those are the 4 most important aspects of living that help us to be well and to be whole. So once you know what your dynamic metabolic type is, you know what food categories to eat and avoid. So if you're a hot excess, a raw vegan diet's a great idea for a while, because the vegan diet will remove the inflammation and the toxins. Raw food is cooling according to traditional Chinese medicine. So if you're too hot, eating foods that are going to cool you down are going to be helpful. But imagine now if you're a cold excess dynamic metabolic type and you do a raw vegan diet, right? You're cooling down your coldness. You're making it even colder. You're actually going to make yourself worse. And so this starts to answer the question of why people try these different diet fads. And sometimes they work for some people, and sometimes some people feel worse. Right. So as an example, intermittent fasting, right? If you are an excess dynamic metabolic type, hot or cold or temperature neutral, you're going to love intermittent fasting because it's anti-inflammatory. It removes toxins. But if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, hot, cold, or temperature neutral, that's going to wreck you if you do intermittent fasting. Because when you fast and you don't eat, you're making yourself more deficient. So you're draining out energy you don't really actually have, and you're making yourself worse. And so once you know your dynamic metabolic type, you can kind of navigate through and understand what exercises are going to benefit you before you even do them. What type of nutrition will benefit you. So if you're cold all the time, you have to warm yourself up. So this is where cooked and spicier foods come in to raise your body temperature. If you're temperature neutral, you want to kind of be on both sides of the fence. You want to have some raw food, but some cooked and spicy food, so you maintain that temperature. But if you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, you might want to do intermittent fasting or a vegan diet. But if you're a cold excess, you want to make sure that your vegetables are cooked, so that it's all about balance. And we teach that in our online course. And we have some really great tips in our burnout assessment on our website to help people really get started to understand how to manage their 4 pillars of wellness and create their own personalized wellness plan. And we also recommend that people do this more than once, right? So you want to do it about 2 to 3 times a year so that you can make corrections as you go along. It's just like when you want to drive somewhere, you don't just put the wheel straight and go in a straight line. You have to occasionally turn the steering wheel so you stay on the road. It's the same thing here. So it's kind of an evergreen tool that you can keep using so that you stay on the road to wellness, prevent diseases, and just do the things you love, up-level your business, get it off the ground.
I love it. I love it. Again, and we'll put this in the show notes, but her website is awakenedwellnessnow.com. That's awakenedwellnessnow.com. Go check that out. Get those assessments. Take a look at it. Great information, Dr. Riobe. Unfortunately, we're out of time as time flies